the good thing is having Professor Einstein and Dr. Gabrick talking about the concepts of both pyramidal aberrometry and high definition OCT. And that's why I want to share with you a couple of cases for you to see what's the advantage of having both the MS39 and the Osiris coupled to your practice seamlessly. So typically, as you saw, OCT harbors overshine fluid better capabilities. Posterior curvature and elevation, pachymetry, segmental tomography, HD OCT sections, and corneal haze assessment. So Osiris by itself, as you saw with Ivan, is a pyramidal aberrometry. What really puts it apart is it's a very large dynamic range, no aliasing, and that's the issue when you have those lenses. Even if you could make those lenses 5,000, for instance, on any Hartmann shack, you will have a problem of aliasing. So you wouldn't know where each ray of light comes from which end, and that's actually a bottleneck. It's not just about being able to produce high resolution. The problem is there is a finite limit from those lenses to provide any information, and that's something that does not apply to the Osiris, and that's why the sky is your limit with the resolution. You could go even higher than 9,000. So I will start first with the MS39, moving on to the combination of both Osiris and MS39. But again, these cases I would like you to review just to show you the advantages of having an OCT over shine fluid. Just like that, this is a shine fluid showing a posterior elevation nodule and a posterior curvature nodule. However, the anterior curvature looks pretty nice. So it's usually the other way around. When you see the anterior curvature, you think about the epithelium. Here, actually, no, you think, what's going on? Well, let's take a look at the MS39 scan. And if you see that scan, it looks pretty nice and pristine. That's a post-myopic ablation. You can see the epithelial thickness in the center, curvature, oblate of a cornea. But let's look at the posterior float and curvature, and they are pristine. A very symmetrical bow tie posteriorly. So typically, if you look at the slit lamp, that patient had a small scar right in there. And if you look at the very same scan you did, the MS39, that's why we forget about always looking not just at the tomography, but at the OCT. You can see that this scar goes through Bowman's all the way in. It's about 159 microns. So again, here completely you change decision. You were thinking first of a possible ectasia, and now you're thinking, no, it's a scar, and then how you can treat it, knowing it's through Bowman and deep again. The other thing, so one, better posterior curvature and float, but two, better pachymetry. This is a patient with a corneal ring segment, but the patient had cross-linking. You can see a very thick demarcation line and haze in the center. It's cross-linking with a Dresden protocol. At the time, no HPMC, the typical old riboflavin solution. Look at the shine fluid, and that's, look at the MS39, and that's the pachymetry you read, 368. That patient, by the way, is 2 years post-cross-linking. And take a look at what the shine fluid would show. It's 308. There's a 60 micron difference. And we have shown that in AJO before when we looked at ultrasound in a prospective study. We looked ultrasound, OCT, and shine fluid. And the more the haze, the more the difference between shine fluid and OCT. And OCT were very close to ultrasound, but the gold standard, of course, was ultrasound. Now, the next thing is that OCT can depict ocular history. And then what I'm going to show you, we have automated this. We have published it in the Journal of Refractive Surgery, and we are working with the CSO team to have it built in very soon. We have demoed it 2 years ago in ESCRS, but I think Francesco is promising us that soon this will be available, automated using deep learning on your MS39 very soon. So, but what I'm going to show you is that what us human would go through, but this is going to be automated on the MS39. So, this patient, if you look at what you see here, is a hyporeflective flap in the center, hyperreflective in the periphery, often what we see in flaps. But if you look at the anamorphic, and that's originally by Dan on the concept of anamorphic on the Artemis, and now brought in the MS39, you can see how much more resolution you get because you're compressing this cornea. And you can see that, again, you see the typical feature of the flap, hyporeflective in the center, hyperreflective in the periphery. But also you would know that this is a mechanical keratome because it's a meniscal flap. This other eye is actually, again, take a look at the anamorphic. It's a femtosecond flap because it's a planar flap. It's very nice vertical and planar flap. This case is a PRK because I don't see Bowman's layer. The bilaminar Bowman's layer is not there, but you have instead a basement membrane. And you can see the epithelium is thicker in the center than the periphery. That's a myopic PRK. That otherwise is a, what do you think? Correct, but you're not supposed to say it. You're cheating. Okay, so this is a hyperopic PRK. Why is that? You could see the basement, the Bowman's layer in the center, but it's not in the periphery because hyperopic PRK ablates everything right, right not in the center. So that's a hyperopic PRK. By the way, you could see the same because what Professor Einstein showed you, that the problem of most OCTs is when you go in the periphery, you lose resolution due to refraction and reflection. So you end up with a loss of the definition of the base of the Bowman's layer, and you see them fusing together. But this way out of the periphery, at least at 6 millimeter out. But this thing you see that in the, like 2 to 3 millimeter, it's gone, and that's because you've had hyperopic PRK. Okay, how about now this one? Anybody would suggest what would be the possible history behind that cornea?
Moria.
Yes, but what else?
What else?
So this patient had microkeratome LASIK, but what else?
Hyperopic?
Yes, a hyperopic PRK over a LASIK flap. So you see the LASIK flap, it's minuscule, and you see Bowman's layer, but it disappears just 2 millimeters out or 3 millimeters out, fuses, and that's actually a patient we treated with a hyperopic PRK over a LASIK flap because it was customized hyperopic PRK. Okay, so the same concept, you take it further for patients with cross-linking and keratoconic patients. This is a demarcation line. If the patient presented to me and I wasn't sure because he didn't know whether he had PRK with it or not, and actually no, because Bowman's layer is there. Now this patient, on the other hand, you see a demarcation line that is pretty intense, of course, because it's a bit shallow. And as you can see, there's no Bowman's layer. Instead, there's a basal membrane. This patient had PRK with cross-linking. So you can tell, even though the patient doesn't know, often the patient comes to me, and this was actually one of the reviewers in GRS when we submitted. He said, why would you need the algorithm? Patient would tell you the history. Often the patient tell me the wrong history. They tell me I had PRK and they had LASIK, or vice versa. Or that, if they had cross-linking, they tell me the cross-linking, they didn't know they had PRK, and so on and so forth. You'll be amazed. And often the doctor would actually miss even to ask the patient and go ahead, perform an IR calculation without knowing or without doing the proper calculations. So with an automated detector, not just it will detect the flap, segment the flap for you, but it will tell you this patient had hyperopic LASIK or myopic or mechanical or femto-LASIK or SMILE or so on and so forth. And this patient had PRK with cross-linking with significant haze because the patient had mitomycin C added to it. This patient had regular PRK, but you can see the subepithelial haze, and month later with steroids, the haze got better. And again, that's another tool. You'll be able to quantitate haze automatically based on grayscale unit when you see the patients. All that can be automated. And looking at OCT sections, I think that's so important. And Professor Einstein showed us a lot of nice examples, Ivan as well. But I would like to discuss this nice example just to tell you that what Dan always says, that this is the slit lamp of the century. This is actually way better than my slit lamp, and I'll show you why. Because with that patient, she presented to me with a rubber band injury to her eye. The flap was dislodged. She did LASIK about 15 years outside. I repositioned the flap. The patient came the next day seeing 20/20, very happy. Patient came back 11 days later. And that's what I see. Okay? And I'm like, wow, that's pretty fast for epithelial ingrowth. And my knee-jerk reflex was like, okay, let's take the patient to the laser and let's scrape and everything. But of course, because just like Dan, I do an MS39 on every single visit for every single patient, no matter what. And that's why it's important always to go back, review your own, because slit lamp, you cannot document, you cannot review back, but this is a digital slit lamp. I can go back maybe 3 months before and see and compare. So because I do it, I took a look, and on the slit lamp, I would swear it's in the interface, but what I see here is actually it's not. You see, it's above the interface, it's inside the flap. And if you look at the regular OCT, it's actually inside the flap. It's a little bit deeper in the periphery, as if it's going through that epithelial growth, going against the easiest pathway, and in 11 days, creating this kind of track. It's virtually impossible. But I have to believe my OCT, and I have to act accordingly. So instead of relifting the flap, there's only discovering there's nothing, and only then inviting more epithelial ingrowth by relifting another flap another time. Basically, I did a transepithelial PTK combined with mitomycin C. And that's the case right under the laser, and 6 months out, the cornea is pristine centrally and peripherally. So completely a change of decision. And by the way, I want to show you another patient I got, that the epithelium can go through the toughest pathways and not into the flap. This is a patient with a bridal suture. This has been published before, but you can see how much the epithelium can go in above and beyond to create this kind of encapsulated epithelium inside the cornea. And a rubber band breaking Bowman's can invite epithelium under it, and how much it can. By the way, once this was evacuated, look at the encapsulated layer you could see in here. Now, Ms39 combined with the Osiris, and I think this is the magic. You've all seen these images, right? This is the Vivity, and you can know this is the only device with a high dynamic range that will go through these aberrated IOLs and still would get you a valid wavefront. So if you want to treat or if you want to diagnose, you have the possibility. And as Ivan said, this is way better than an eye trace. This is not 200 rays, this is thousands of rays, and you can treat accordingly. So if you look at it, okay, this is the typical part of the Vivity, but this is where the magic happens seamlessly. You can combine your Ms39 with the Osiris to take a look at intraocular higher order aberration. And that's, by the way, what we did. And we published in GRS about 3 months ago. For the first time ever, we looked at intraocular higher order aberration of keratoconus. And guess what? They are elevated, and often they mirror, but sometimes they negate the corneal aberrations. You can get as much as a diopter and a half of coma internally to compensate, not just posterior curvature, and I'm talking intraocularly. And that's what separates us, by the way, from the eye trace, which cannot know that when it tells you internally, that's posterior and on. So if you have an IOL in a keratoconic patients, you won't be able to tell whether these aberrations are intraocularly or quote unquote internally. So what you do is ocular wavefront, corneal wavefront, and that's internal, means intraocular. And what you see here is a spherical aberration, a primary spherical aberration of minus 0.17. That's exactly what Alcon would tell you internally, but would never want to tell you publicly. This is the panoptics, and you can see that the spherical aberration is almost zero. I have also for isopure, I have also for all different. The isopure will have more primary spherical aberration. So this is a lady, 59-year-old lady with a trifocal IOLs implanted 5 months ago, and she has blurred vision and wears her eyeglasses all the time, not happy. That's her refraction, not corrected to 20/20. On slit lamp, she has MGD, mild PCO, and the wrinkling of the capsule. This is her Ms39 in the first eye, and that's in the second eye, and they all look good. But if you look at the Osiris, what you see is, definitely something abnormal in terms of scatter with a massive, that's the micro aberration scatter index of 62. Typically in a regular eye, nice eye, I would say it's 15. In a trifocal eye, it should be 30 or 40 at best. At the other eye, you could see the wrinkling, already from the aberrometry map, and the mass is 51. But the internal aberrations are all good. Why? Because I can do the subtraction and look at the internal ablation of the eye, and there's nothing. Okay? So it's not that the IOL is decentered or anything. Everything inside is good. So ocular aberrations are good. Internal aberrations are good. It's just the capsule. So even though this patient was given the opinion of removing the lens, actually went in and did the YAG capsulotomy, which might be counterintuitive with other doctors. Why would you do that? Just exchange the lens. And definitely post-operatively, the massing got much better. The ocular interface looks really nice now, the IOL interface. And again, the patient is 20/20. That's another patient with a pellet injury to the cornea, and that's the last case, so has not been seeing well since. So the patient is a carpenter, got a high fast speed wooden injury to his cornea, was removed, and patient was said everything's fine. However, the patient was not happy because that eye was correcting to +1 minus 5.5 at 90, and he's still 20/50. So he's not happy with that much astigmatism. He saw many ophthalmologists, and some of them told him, well, don't worry, that eye has amblyopia. You have had always this high astigmatism. Don't worry about it. And the other doctor told him, just get some eyeglasses and that's it. So he was completely unhappy. So looking at the slit lamp, you could see just nothing centrally, but you could see the little, just off center area where he has scarring from that palate injury. I look at the MS39 and it's like, that's weird. His corneal astigmatism is almost nothing. Where does this astigmatism come from? And the patient swears that he didn't have that astigmatism before. He swears that he sees always was good in the other eye. We always thought that maybe the patient is just looking binocularly and he didn't know. But I didn't want to be the third doctor telling him it's nothing. And of course, when you do the Osiris, that's what you get on a seemingly normal cornea. Look here and you see, wow, a lot of higher order aberration, a lot of astigmatism. Let's do the internal aberration. See what's intraocularly. And intraocularly, the patient has 2.23 diopter of higher order aberration, and he has a whopping 6.26 diopters of astigmatism. And otherwise, everything looks good. So I take a look again on the OCT. That's what I see. It doesn't look that anything is penetrating, but let's take a look again on a raw scan. And scanning it one by one again, you can see that possible point of entry. Kind of something entered and sealed again on itself. I take a look again on the slit lamp, high magnification, and I can see this, just right under that incision there on the cornea. So as if there's a projectile thing that went in, cornea sealed back in, and went through the iris. So I dilate, of course, and that's what I see. Now, typically, this is off-center, okay? So why would the patient be unhappy? Because if you look at retroillumination, that's what you see, a wrinkling of the capsule, producing a lot of trefoil, tetrafoil, and all that. And that's what we were seeing up. Some coma, a lot of trefoil and tetrafoil, and astigmatism. And that's what OCT would show, the MS39. And again, these are the wrinkling. When I did the video, you could see the wrinkling there going all the way in, even though centrally he's fine, but the wrinkling is going all the way in and producing these aberrations. So technically, we ended up doing phaco. Patient was very satisfied. This is the this is the parameters post-operatively. Really nice and pristine. The astigmatism is 0 and almost 0 in refraction. And that's the intraocular higher order aberrations. Also reading perfectly well everything. Patient is extremely happy. So the whole point is when you have those two combinations, I mean, it took us a lot of time to transition from Placido to Scheinflug. Not to say I still believe Placido is superior to Scheinflug in the anterior cornea, but combining them like the series is amazing. But remember how much it took us and later our colleagues to transition. But now with this, it's a no-brainer why we shouldn't transition. This is what you see when you have the new devices. You see way beyond. You see at the ocular history, you see things that you never thought you would. Thank you.